Hello everyone, and welcome to my Subtlety guide for 10.1.5. So you wanna be stabby, sneaky, doing all the good rogue stuff? Well, then you're in luck, and we will start with Subtlety. So, the way you generally play Subtlety is based about building combo points and spending combo points. So the advantage of playing Sub-Rogue is that you can do basically a generic build where you lose a slight amount of single target DPS, but you gain access to quite a bit of burst AoE, which is always very good and very fun. So in order to understand how Subtlety works, we will talk about our stat weights as the first thing. Generally, every rogue spec wants crit. As much crit as you can get. That's the most important thing. Get your crit as high as possible, and then secondly, as it stands right now for Subtlety at least, you go for versatility in single target and mastery for AoE. This is simply because versatility improves all your damage on your single target, including like stuff like beacon or trinket procs, embellishments, damage procs you can get from everywhere else as well. Versatility is just overall a great stat. It also helps you keeping alive, staying alive. And all in all, it's all good. So crit, verse, and then mastery. Generally, you don't want any haste, or very little haste at least, because the natural energy regen you gain from haste is extremely low. And gaining maybe one additional energy every 20 seconds won't really affect anything in the larger scheme of things. So, how do we play this? Well, generally, you just want to make sure that you have Slice and Dice up. This is a nice buff that gives you 50% more attack speed. Attack speed is good and nice.
It's free real estate.
Secondly, you keep up Rupture. Since you have, this is just your main dot that you will have up, and it's always worth using if the target survives for at least 12 seconds. So keep that up. Now you might have noticed that while I'm just standing here and hitting this thing, I'm generating combo points naturally. That's because each rogue spec has a passive way of generating energy and combo points in some regards. For Subtlety, this is through shadow techniques. So every auto attack has a chance to generate one combo point and some energy. Now you see that the 50% attack speed increase from Slice and Dice is extremely important. So, for rogues, there are like three main things you want to get as Subtlety. That is Facility, which is a burst of energy, and very important, and also it increases our mastery by 19.6%, 20% for 6 seconds. Well, our Shadow Dance lasts for 6 seconds. So whenever we go into Shadow Dance, we will always use a Facility if we have one available. This is even more so the case when we do our opener and stuff like that. Second most important thing is Deeper Stratagem. Since all of our damage, or most of our damage, comes from our finishers, having access to an additional combo point and overall increasing our finisher damage by 5% is something that we really like. We also have the same thing in our spec tree, which is Secret Stratagem, which is another combo point, and another 5% increased damage to all our finishers. Thinking you can start to kind of see the idea behind it. The third thing that you want to go for is Cold Blood, because getting a guaranteed crit is hugely important and probably the reason why Sub can do as much damage as it can do at the minute. Because Cold Blood you will always use with Secret Technique, an ability we will come into later when we talk about the rotation and your opener and all that kind of stuff. Outside of that, most of the things that you have access to as a rogue is basically utility, movement, and survivability. There are a few good points outside of that, like getting Seal Fate, where whenever we crit, we basically just get one additional combo point, which is amazing. Now we're talking about some of our defensive layers from the class tree. You have Evasion, which is 100% dodge chance. You have Cloak of Shadows. You also have, from just being a rogue, access to Feint, which you can see in the top left of the screen, which is a 15-second cooldown, costs 25 energy, but reduces damage you take from AoE effects on bosses and stuff by 40%. It is probably the strongest on-demand defensive ability in this game, because it has a low cooldown, a high damage reduction, and it lasts for 6 seconds, which is more than enough if you actually time it right. Now you can actually improve on Feint when you go into Cheat Death. Now Cheat Death is one of the choice nodes that are kind of like discussed in the rogue community, where you're talking about Cheat Death being the, you always run Cheat Death because sometimes you just like get a bad overlap and you would have died otherwise. Sure. However, if you know what you're doing and you don't tend to die, Elusiveness is a great choice because this improves the ability of Feint to reduce the damage you take. Also makes Evasion actually be a defensive, which is pretty cool. So this is your bread and butter. Sometimes you can choose, rather than going for Nimble Fingers, go into Gouge, maybe go into Master Poisoner to increase the effectiveness of your poisons. Now, when we look at the spec tree, and it's quite important, there are some things we have to understand. First of all, we get a major cooldown, so to speak, in Shadow Blades. Basically, it's just more combo points, you do more damage as Shadow for 20 seconds. Other than that, you will pick up Gloomblade to replace Backstab. This is also how we get Find Weakness. Now, we don't really care about Find Weakness as much as anyone else because a lot of our damage will come from shadow damage. Hence why we pick up stuff like Veil Touch, which makes our abilities deal more magic damage. And Dark Brew, which also increases our shadow damage dealt by 10%. This also makes it so that our Rupture and our Poisons will now deal shadow damage and magic damage by default, which is pretty nice for a slight passive damage increase. Now, we talked a little bit about Shadow Dance. Now, since Sub has access to it as baseline, you don't need to pick it up through here. The reason why we don't pick it up here is because even though it's a 1 minute cooldown, we have this wonderful little thing called Deepening Shadows. This says that whenever we do a finishing move, we reduce the cooldown of Shadow Dance by 0.7 seconds per combo point spent. I think you can see where we're going with this. Since we have Shadow Blades and we have Gloomblade, which gives us combo points, we have Steel Fate, which gives us additional combo points whenever we crit, you can kind of see how it all kind of flows together to just reducing the cooldown of Shadow Dance to the point where it doesn't matter to have a second charge. Dance Macabre. Dance Macabre is the single most spec-defining feature in this game. Basically, it's like you press Shadow Dance, you use Gloomblade. Gloomblade gives you 1 stack. Now, on the rest of your Shadow Dance, you just deal 6% more damage. So for each additional ability you use, that's a new one, just gives you 6% more damage. This also means that we will always use the Secret Technique as our finisher. And you just summon 2 Shadow Clones that does the same amount of damage in AoE as shadow damage. So now you're starting to see how you get magic damage, you get shadow damage, you get percent damage increases, you do 30% more damage during your Shadow Dance. So it's all about Shadow Dancing, stacking Dance Macabre, finishing with a big Secret Technique, and that's how you do your damage. Now, this is the bread and butter single target setup you can do. This is your generic all-around build, where you still have a focus on single target, with Dance Macabre and Secret Technique, Shadow Blades, all those kind of things. You're just going ham. However, you have some adds every now and then. Now you have an AoE finisher, which is Black Powder. It is literally just eviscerate for more targets. Well, in single target, you always pick up the first dance. This means that just using Shadow Dance, you get 4 combo points. So we start from stealth, of course, because we're a rogue. Now you might have noticed that my Gloom Blade has changed into Shadow Strike. Shadow Strike is just the ambush of Subtlety. So it's a heavy-hitting ability that also can teleport you if you're in stealth. It also grants you 3 combo points. So during our Shadow Dance, what you actually want to do is do Shadow Dance, Gloom Blade, Eviscerate, Shadow Strike, Secret Technique, and then Shadow Strike, Eviscerate. I'm gonna go into Shadow Dance, Gloom Blade, Eviscerate, Shadow Strike, Secret Tech, Shadow Strike, Eviscerate. Outside of Shadow Dance, you just wanna keep Slice and Dice going, and make sure you reapply Rupture if you need to. That is how you do Subtlety in single target. If you don't have the 4-piece, you would go to increase the duration of Shadow Dance rather than increasing the crit chance of Symbols of Death. This is probably the best starter build for Subtlety. There is another build you can do a single target Subtlety, which is Flagellation. You want to play this version whenever you need that 1.5 minute cooldown, rather than a continuous overall just keep pressing Shadow Dance, going into Shadow Dance rotation, and blast, 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 blast. If you want to do AoE, instead of Eviscerate, we use a Black Powder, and we still focus on Secret Technique as our main damage because it hits all additional targets. Now, we pick up Shuriken Tornado, which is a 1 minute cooldown, and it just throws out your AoE, like your Shuriken Storm, for 4 seconds. Just to show it off, this just means that when you have this talented and you're going for AoE, then right before going into Shadow Dance, you go Shuriken Storm and then Shadow Dance. Outside of that, it's just use Black Powder out of instead of Eviscerates and you will do fine. So that's your AoE rotation. It's just using this before Shadow Dance. Otherwise, in Shadow Dance, just replace Eviscerate with Black Powder. And that's basically how you play Sub-Rogue. I wish you good luck in the future. And see you all for the other guides I will be making. Bye!